Hi guys, and welcome to chapter 8 of the Lady Vanishes I'm going to be reading today. I have had a little bit of sloe gin and lemonade, but not too much, so I won't slur my words. As it's such a lovely day, I thought I'd come and film outside. Yeah, so we'll get cracking with chapter 8. Oh, I hope that doesn't fall over. So just to say, so in chapter 7, so Iris' car has got on the train despite being hit over the head. She's got into the compartment with people that don't particularly want her there. She's like an added extra at the last minute. And then she meets this character, Miss Froy. So she's just spoken to her, and Miss Froy has asked her to go and have some tea together. So, so I've just poured sloe gin for myself. Nice. Should have had a tray or something, shouldn't I? Oh, never mind. I have a captive audience of 2 today. You ready, boys, to listen to this? Okay. Chapter 8 of The Lady Vanishes by Ethel, Lina. It's called Tea Interval. Iris was too stunned with surprise to reply. She looked incredulously at the sandy, spiny stretches flowing past the window, as though expecting to see them turn to Swiss chalets or blue Italian lakes. "Oh," she gasped, "you're English." "Of course, I thought I looked typical. Are you coming to tea?" "Oh, yes." As Iris followed her guide out of the carriage, she was rather disconcerted to find that their compartment was at the end of the corridor. It looked as though her protective squared knot insured her against railway smashes after all. "Are we next to the engine?" she asked. "Oh no," the Tweed lady assured her. "There are ordinary coaches in between. It's an extra long train because of the end of the season rush. They have to pack them in with a shoehorn." Apparently she was the type that collected information, for she began to broadcast almost immediately. "Just glance at the next carriage to ours as you go by and I'll tell you something." Although Iris felt no curiosity, she obeyed. Afterwards she was sorry because she could not forget what she saw. A rigid figure, covered with rugs, lay stretched on the length of one seat. It was impossible to tell whether it were a man or woman. For head, eyes and forehead were bandaged, and the features concealed by a crisscross of plaster strips. Apparently the face had been gashed to mutilation point. Iris recoiled in horror, which was increased when she realised that the pallid man with the spade beard was in charge of the invalid. Beside him was a nun, whose expression was so callous that it was difficult to connect her with an act of mercy. Oh, sorry, I've got a little bug. Go on. Okay. No bugs were harmed in the filming of this. Just fix it off. I'm now going to be covered in gin, so I'll be happy. So, apparently the face had been gashed to mutilation point. Not a time to make a joke. Iris recoiled in horror, which was increased when she realised, oh, I've read this, difficult to connect her with any act of mercy. Beside him was a nun whose expression was so callous it was difficult to connect her with any act of mercy. While they chatted together, the patient feebly raised one hand. Although they saw the movement, they ignored it. They might have been porters responsible for the transport of a bit of lumber, instead of a suffering human being. The fluttering fingers affected Iris with a rush of acute sympathy. She shrank back, for she thought that, had the cards fallen otherwise, she too might be lying neglected by some indifferent stranger. "That nun looks a criminal," she whispered. "She's not a nun," the Tweed lady informed her. "She's a nursing sister." "Then I pity her patient. Ghastly to be ill on a journey, and she's not a spectacle. Why can't they pull down the blind?" "It would be dull for them." "Poor devil, I suppose it's a man." Iris was so foolishly anxious to break the parallel between the motionless figure and herself that she was disappointed when her companion shook her head. No, a woman. They got in at our station higher up. The doctor was telling the Baroness about it. She's just been terribly injured in a motor smash and there's risk of serious brain injury, so the doctor's rushing her to Trieste for a tricky operation. It's a desperate chance to save her reason and her life. Is that man with the black beard a doctor? Asked Iris. Yes, very clever too. Is he? I'd rather have a vet. The tweed lady who was leading did not hear her muttered protest. They had to force their way through the block corridors and had covered about half the distance when the spinster collided with a tall, dark lady in grey who was standing at the door of a crowded carriage. Oh, I'm so sorry, she apologised. I was just looking out to see if our tea was coming. I gave the order to an attendant. Iris recognised Mrs. Barnes' voice and shrank back, for she was not anxious to meet the vicar and his wife. But her companion gave a cry of delight. Oh, you're English too, she said. This is my lucky day. As Mrs. Barnes' soft brown eyes seemed to invite confidence, she added, I've been in exile for a year. Are you on your way home? Asked Mrs. Barnes with ready sympathy. Yes, but I can't believe it. It's far too good to be true. Shall I send a waiter with your tea? That would be really kind. My husband is such a wretched traveller, like so many big, strong men. Iris listened impatiently, for her temples were beginning to throb savagely. Now that Mrs. Barnes had managed to introduce her husband's name into the conversation, she knew that her own tea might be held up indefinitely. Are we blocking the way? She asked. Mrs. Barnes recognised her with rather a forced smile, for the Gabriel episode still rankled. Surprised to see us? She asked. We decided after all not to wait for the last through train, and our friends, the Mistford porters, came with us. In fact, we're a full muster, for the honeymooners are here too. Iris had struggled a little further down the surging corridor when the tweed lady spoke to her over her shoulder. What a sweet face your friend has, like a suffering Madonna. Oh no, she's very bright, Iris assured her, and she's definitely not a friend. They crossed the last dangerously clanking connecting way and entered the restaurant car, which seemed full already. The Mrs. Flood porter, both wearing well-cut white linen travelling coats, had secured a table and were drinking tea. Their formal bow, when Iris squeezed by them, was conditional recognition before the final fade-out. We'll speak to you during the journey, it seemed to say, but at Victoria we become strangers. As Iris showed no inclination to join them, Miss Rose could not resist the temptation to manage a situation. Your friend is trying to attract your attention, she called out. Iris turned and saw that her companion had discovered the last spare corner, a table wedged against the wall, and was reserving a place for herself. When she joined her, the little lady was looking round her with shining eyes. I ordered the tea for your nice friend, she said. Oh, isn't all this fun? Her pleasure was so spontaneous and genuine that Iris could not condemn it as gush. She stared doubtfully at the faded old gold plush window curtains, the smutty tablecloth, the glass dish of cherry jam, and then she glanced at her companion. She received a vague impression of a little puckered face, but there was a sparkle in the faded blue eyes and an eager note in the voice that suggested a girl. Afterwards, when she was trying to collect evidence of what she believed must be an extraordinary conspiracy, it was this discrepancy between a youthful voice and a middle-aged spinster which made her doubt her own senses. In any case, her recognition was far from clear, but she did not remember looking consciously at her companion again. The sun was blazing in through the window, so that she shaded her eyes with one hand most of the time she was having tea. But as she listened to the flow of excited chatter, she had the feeling that she was being entertained by someone much younger than herself. Why do you like it? She asked. Because it's travel, we're moving, everything's moving. Iris also had the impression that the whole scene was flickering like an early motion picture. The waiters swung down the rocking carriage, balancing trays. Scraps of country flew past the window. Smuts rained down on the flakes of butter and the sticky cakes. Dusty motes quivered in the rays of the sun, and the china shook with every jerk of the engine. She tried to drink some tea before it was all shaken over the rim of her cup. She learned that her companion was an English governess, Miss Winifred Foy, and was on her way home for a holiday. It came as a shock of surprise to know that this adult lady actually possessed living parents. Pater and Mater say they can talk of nothing else but my return, declared Miss Froy. They're as excited as children, and so is Sock. Sock, repeated Iris. Yes, short for Socrates, the Pater's name for him. He's our dog. He's an old English sheepdog, not pure but so appealing, and he's really devoted to me. Mater said he understands when I'm coming home, but not when. So the old duffer meets every train, and then the darling comes back with his tail down, the picture of depression. Pater and Mater are looking forward to seeing his frantic joy the night I do come. I'd love to see him, murmured Iris. The old parent's happiness left her unmoved, but she was specially fond of dogs. She got a clear picture of Sock, a shaggy mongrel, absurdly clownish and overgrown, with amber eyes beaming upon his wisps and gambolling like a puppy in the joy of reunion. Suddenly Miss Froy broke off at a recollection. Before I forget, I want to explain why I did not back you up about the window. No wonder you thought I could not be English. It was stuffy, but I didn't like to interfere because of the Baroness. Do you mean the appalling black person? Yes, the Baroness. I'm under an obligation to her. My place in the train. I'd booked second class, but there wasn't a seat left, so the Baroness most kindly paid the difference so that I could travel first class in her carriage. Yes, she doesn't look kind, murmured Iris. Perhaps she's rather overwhelming, but she's a member of the family to which I had the honour of being governess. It's not wise to mention names in public, but I was governess to the very highest in the place. These remote districts are still feudal, and centuries behind us. You can have no idea of the power of my late employer. What he says goes, and he hasn't got to speak, a nod is enough. Degrading, muttered Iris, who resented authority. It is agreed, Miss Froy, but it's in the atmosphere, and after a time one absorbs it, and one grows spineless. And that's not English. I feel so reinforced now I've met you, we must stick together. Iris made no promise. Her fright had not changed her fundamentally, only weakened her nerve. She had the modern prejudice in favour of youth, and had no intention of being tied to a middle-aged spinster for the rest of the journey. Are you going back again? She asked distantly. Yes, but not to the castle. It's rather awkward, but I wanted another 12 months to perfect my accent, so I engaged to teach the children of the... well, we'll call him the leader of the opposition. She lowered her voice in a whisper. The truth is, there's a small but growing communist element which is very opposed to my late employer. In fact, they've accused him of corruption and all sorts of horrors. I don't ask myself if it's true, for it's not my business. I only know he's a marvellous man with wonderful charm and personality. Blood tells. Shall I tell you something rather indiscreet? Iris nodded warily. She was beginning to feel dazed by the heat and incessant clatter. Her tea had not refreshed her, for most of it had splashed into her saucer. The engine plunged and jolted over the metals with drunken jerks, belching out wreaths of acrid smoke which streamed past the windows. Miss Froy continued her serial while Iris listened in bored resignation. I was terribly anxious to say goodbye to my employer, so that I could assure him that my going over to the enemy, so to speak, was not treachery. His valet and secretary both told me that he was away at his hunting lodge, but somehow I felt that they were putting me off. Anyway, I lay awake until early morning, before it was light, when I heard water splashing in the bathroom. Only one, my dear. For the castle arrangements were primitive, although my bedroom was like a stage royal apartment, all gilding and peacock blue velvet, with a huge circular mirror let into the ceiling. Well, I crept out like a mouse and met him in the corridor. There we were, plain man and woman, I in my dressing gown, and he in his bathrobe, and with his hair all wet and rough. But he was charming. He actually shook my hand and thanked me for my services. Miss Froy stopped to butter the last scrap of roll. As she was wiping her sticky fingers, she heaved a sigh of happiness. I cannot tell you, she said, what a relief it was to leave under such pleasant circumstances. I always try to be on good terms with everyone. Of course I'm insignificant, but I can say truthfully that I have not got an enemy in the world. That's the end of that chapter. So Miss Froy thinks she hasn't got an enemy in the world, but we will see what happens. I hope you guys are doing okay, taking care and staying safe, and I hope you're still liking listening to more chapters of The Lady Vanishes. Yeah, it's really lovely and sunny here in England at the moment, here in Shropshire. So I hope you're getting a chance to get outside or at least open a window and look at nature. So yeah, take care. Bye guys.